Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to AD&D Second Edition Player's Handbook Read Through Races. This race today is going to be Elves. We did Dwarves, now we're doing Elves. Max does not like Elves. He's not a fan. I don't hate Elves. If I can't play a human, I probably would play an Elf. Just because I like playing spellcasters, and we're going to get into why that's important in this video. As a matter of fact, we're going to do it right now.
To be fair, the elf thing for me, I think, is more about the players of the typical elf player than it is about the race itself.
Well, we will find out because you're going to get a refresher just like everyone else. Elves tend to be somewhat shorter and slimmer than normal humans. Shorter and slimmer. Their features are finely chiseled and delicate, and they speak in melodic tones. Although they appear fragile and weak, as a race they are quick and strong. Elves often live to be over 1,200 years old, although long before this time they may feel compelled to depart the realms of men and mortals. Where they go is uncertain, but it is an undeniable urge of their race. So it's very rare that an elf dies of old age. Usually they just go away. They say bye and they walk away and no one ever sees them again. Is that the same as dead? Effectively, yeah, but they're not. Elves are often considered frivolous and aloof. In fact, they are not, although humans often find their personalities impossible to fathom. They concern themselves with natural beauty, dancing and frolicking, playing and singing, unless necessity dictates otherwise. They are not fond of ships or mines, but enjoy growing things and gazing at the open sky. Even though elves tend toward haughtiness and arrogance at times, they regard their friends and associates as equals. They do not make friends easily, but a friend or enemy is never forgotten. They prefer to distance themselves from humans, have little love for dwarves, and hate the evil denizens of the woods. Little love for dwarves. And dwarves, they are not overly fond of elves. Does this mean hatred? Animosity? Instant? Of course not. No. That's not what those words mean, even when you put them together.
I mean, it doesn't mean kill on sight, but it can certainly mean dubious and GTFO, I don't want to deal with you.
Yeah, but they're not going to be just, and the animosity isn't going to be dialed up just because there's an elf and a dwarf in the same room. It just means that they're probably not going to, chit chat.
And they're both going to annoy the crap out of each other because they have literally different views on life.
Yes.
That cannot be reconciled between the two.
But not to the point of irrationality. No one's going to start a bar brawl just because an elf and a dwarf are having an argument.
Well, the dwarf might.
No, he's not stupid. He's not stupid.
It's not stupid to a dwarf. A brawl is a great way of making new friends.
Sure. Their humor is clever, as are their songs and poetry. Elves are brave, but never foolhardy. They eat sparingly. They drink meat and wine, but seldom to excess. While they find well-wrought jewelry a pleasure to behold, they are not overly interested in money or gain. They find magic and swordplay, or any refined combat art, fascinating. If they have a weakness, it lies in these interests. Now, this makes perfect sense to a human once a human understands that elves live effectively over 1,000 years. They enjoy art. They enjoy things created that are beautiful. Why? Well, art is never finished. You get me? Poetry can always be changed, added on to another stanza. Music. There's always more music. It's stuff that they don't get bored of. And when you live 1,000 years, you don't want to be bored. So you like things that are ever changing, constantly moving forward, and doesn't require a lot of hard work. There are 5 branches of the Elven race: aquatic, gray, high, wood, and dark. Elf player characters are always assumed to be the most common type, high elves, although a character can be another type of elf with the DM's permission. but the choice grants no additional powers. To the eye of the outsiders, the differences between the groups are mostly cosmetic, but most elves maintain that there are important cultural differences between the various groups. That's like internal racism, I guess. Aquatic elves spend their lives beneath the waves and have adapted to these conditions. Gray elves are considered the most noble and serious-minded of the breed. High elves are the most common. Wood elves are considered to be wild, temperamental, and savage. All others hold that the subterranean dark elves are corrupt and evil, no longer part of Elven community. Now, wood elves, that's funny. They're considered to be wild, temperamental, and savage. That's by other elves, not by everyone else. By everyone else, they're just considered like elves that I get along with better. Because they're not as haughty, they're not as aloof, they're more down to earth, easier to talk to. So, these are the elves that non-elves like better. A player character elf can be a cleric, fighter, mage, thief, or ranger. In addition, you can be a multi-class fighter, mage, fighter, thief, fighter, mage, thief, or mage, thief. The rules governing these combinations are explained in multi-class, which I'm going to get in later. Now, this is the first time we've hit where you can have 3 different classes at the same time. Fighter, mage, thief. That's crazy. And notice that cleric you cannot be a multi-class cleric. If you're a cleric, you're just a cleric. If you're an elf.
I never actually realized that before.
Yeah. All right. Elves have found it useful to learn the languages of several of the forest's children, both the good and the bad. As initial languages, the elf can choose. Now, this is initial languages. You can learn what the hell you want, but this is what you can choose starting. Common, elf, gnome, halfling, goblin, hobgoblin, orc, and gnoll. The number of languages an elf can learn is by his intelligence and by his proficiency slots. We're going to get to that later. Elven characters, this is why a lot of people take elves, have 90% resistance to sleep and all charm-related spells. 90%. That is no joke.
Charm-related. Related. That's not one spell.
Yeah, it's not just charm person. No. It's all charm-related spells. That means if your dungeon master says this spell is related to charm, 90% ineffective against an elf. This is in addition to the normal saving throw allowed against a charm spell. So even if you flub your magic resistance roll, you could still make your saving throw and not be affected anyway. It doesn't replace the saving throw, it's in addition to. When employing a bow or any sort of bow other than a crossbow, or when using a short or long sword, elves gain a bonus of +1 to their attack rolls. Now, notice it didn't say anywhere that elven fighters get this bonus. No. An elven cleric will get this bonus too. Can he use it a lot of it? Probably not, but an elven thief gets this bonus. An elven mage gets this bonus.
Yeah, it just means the THAC0 penalty would be 1 less.
Yeah. An elf can gain a bonus to surprise opponents, but only if the elf is not in metal armor. Even then, the elf must either be alone or a party comprised only of elves or halflings. Also not in metal armor, or 90 feet or more away from that party if there's non-elves or non-halflings in it.
So when the moon is up here on a Thursday on a day that ends in Z, okay, yeah, you can get that bonus.
Okay, that's why elves stick together. There you go. If he fulfills these conditions, he moves so silently the opponent suffers a -4 penalty to their surprise die rolls. If the elf must open a door or screen to attack, this penalty is reduced to -2. So even opening a door to sneak up on you still gives them a -2 to your surprise roll. And a surprise roll in AD&D 2nd edition is what, a D6?
Yes. 2d6 or 1d6?
Yeah, it's D6s, so -4 is no joke. -2 is good. Elven infravision enables them to see 60 feet in darkness. Secret doors, those constructed so as to be hard to notice, And concealed doors, those hidden from sight by screens, curtains, or the like, are difficult to hide from elves. Merely passing within 10 feet of a concealed door gives an elven character a 1 in 6 chance to notice it. If you are actively searching, you have a 1 in 3 chance, a 1 in 2 on a d6 to find a secret door, and a 1 in 2 chance, 1, 2, 3, to discover a concealed portal. Now, if you have an elf and a dwarf on your side, you're pretty much finding all, non-magically hidden stuff in a room. I mean, just let them at it. As previously stated, elven characters add 1 to their initial dexterity scores. Likewise, as elves are not as sturdy as humans, they deduct 1 from their initial constitution scores. And that is the elf. Nice, quick, nice, dirty. Now, notice it didn't get into the exact differences between the 4 or 5 different kinds of elves, because the game right now is pretty much, no, you're a high elf, let it go. Now, later on in other supplements, it talks about the different racial modifiers for aquatic elf, for dark elf, for wood elf, for all that stuff. A wood elf, actually, I think it's a +1 to strength or a +1 to con, one or the other. So they are different. And of course, aquatic elves, I believe, can breathe water because, they live underwater. So there you go. But doesn't get into it here. Here in the original player's handbook, just choose a high elf. Stop it.
It's 1d10. Some didn't seem right about the d6. It's
okay,
d10.
But still, a -4 to your roll is significant. It's a 40% deficit on a d10. That's pretty good.
When you get to chapter 11 encounters in a few weeks, we'll dive into that more. That's on page 111. But I said the d6 didn't, it was in my head because of what was I covering? Rule Cyclopedia, but it didn't sit right with me.
All right. So what do we have for comments?
Okay. Hold on. There's a couple in here I wanted to star and I didn't. There was a lot of just conversation going back and forth between elves are awesome. Where was it? Yeah, there's one in here I wanted to look at, but I don't really think that it's relevant to what we're talking about right now. So, yeah. So just leave it that. One of the things I will say in here, based on some of the comments, and I think we just got one in that kind of reiterated that, we're not talking about the Elves Handbook. I will be, in the next video, I will be diving into the Gnomes Handbook a little bit. But remember, those handbooks are 100% optional. And this is one of the things that I stress to second edition players versus 5e players, not 2, but about second edition players versus 5e players. We knew how to say no. Yeah. And so if there's a rule or an elf subclass or something you want to bring in, Dungeon Master just be like, no, I don't do wild elves. I don't do dark elves. I don't, yeah. So there was a lot more no back then than you get now. And if somebody whined, I'd be like, bye. I don't, if playing that type of elf is that important to you, find another table. Not going to have you change my setting because you want to do something else.
It's not like, oh, well, if it's not that important, then why don't you acquiesce to it? Well, because if someone wants to play an aquatic elf, my whole campaign is set on being in the desert or something. And the player knows that. That is a session 0 thing. We're in Dark Sun or something like that. Some setting where it's like Lawrence of Arabia type thing.
Al-Qadim.
You want to play an aquatic elf. What the hell's wrong with you? Or you want to play a wood elf. Dude, it's a desert. I don't know what to tell you. No. Except no.
And this will become even more prevalent when he starts talking about the classes and people are like, no, this kit from the Fighter's Handbook. Like my favorite one is this, a little spoiler for you for when we get there. Let me put the subscribe thing up here. Is I despise, and I cannot say that word hard enough. I despise broad groups and tight groups from the Fighter's Handbook. You will never have them in my game. But we'll get to that when he talks about specialization and so on and so forth later on in this book here. But next we got the gnome, and the gnome is going to be an interesting video because he's going to read off the gnome to you, and it might not be what you think it is because you've probably been indoctrinated by World of Warcraft, The Tinker Gnomes, I blame the Tinker Gnomes from Dragonlance starting it. Great NPCs, horrible PCs. And the gnome that you might be used to today is not the gnome of actual Dungeons and Dragons. And I look forward to Heathen Dog bringing that up, starting, and I'll finish it, but starting to inform us about gnomes in the next video. See you then.